Good afternoon, I'm John Metrics from LJ Hooker in Geelong. I'm the agent for the Devlin project. Devlin is a bespoke apartment project at 312 Moorabool Street, Geelong. I'm here today with Mr. Phil Petch. He's a director of Moorabool Heights Proprietary Limited, the developer of this fabulous project. Now, I've known Phil for about 3 years, a little bit more in fact, and I vouch for him personally, but his projects vouch for him even more. His most recent, and I think the most dramatic, is the View Apartments on Ballerine Street. Anyone who's been here in Geelong would see that no vacancy sign is out constantly, and the owners of those apartments are getting easily the yields that we're going to be talking about today. Now, there's a couple of housekeeping matters. This is a webinar. We're using smart technology, but every now and again there might be a pause. And don't worry, we haven't fallen off the perch. It's just buffering or going through the ether to get to you. Also, there's an opportunity to ask questions, and I look forward to having some questions. There's a little bar over in the right-hand side of your page where you can click in some questions. Please don't make them too complicated, and we can attend to that. So right now, I'd like to introduce to you Phil Petch. Welcome, Phil. Oh, and good morning to those that are overseas.
Thanks, John. Well, we'll get stuck into it straight away. Remember a time when investing in residential property was straightforward. You'd really have to go back to the days of Johnny Howard, where the typical investment model for residential property was to purchase a property, neatly gear it, so your outgoings exceeded your incomings. So basically every month you put your hand in your pocket, and your pathway to success was to achieve a capital gain. Now, that model still works, but it's becoming harder and harder to find the right property. So today I really want to talk about an alternate model which relies on yield as a basis of getting a financial return on your investment. So let's get into it. What we'll cover this afternoon is why yield is important, residential commercial property as a strategy, the strategy in action. We'll talk a little bit about our last project, which is the View Apartments in Geelong, which is a real life case study. And I also want to talk about the Devlin, which is our current development. So what's yield? Yield can mean different things to different people. Like a residential agent such as John from Hookers would talk about yield as being the gross rent received on a property as a percentage of the property, but ignoring outgoings. A commercial agent would talk about yield excluding outgoings which are paid by the tenant. But when I'm talking about yield today, I'm talking about net yield. And my definition of net yield is the actual income you receive from your residential property investment after deduction of all the costs like your commissions and your insurance, etc., expressed as an annual percentage of the cost of the investment. So it's a fair income net yield. I'm going to have plenty of rules of thumbs today, so I apologise for that. But the higher the yield, the higher the risk. So each property class has its own risk attributes. So if we look at cash as a base class asset, you know, the yield on cash is low. You can probably get you're lucky to get 3% if in today's market it often got a 2 in front of it. The risk is low. It's backed by the federal government, and your entry costs are low. There's no stamp duty payable. The next property class I'd like to talk about is commercial property. So I'm looking at the mark around about the $500,000 to $1 million mark. So I'm not talking about large towers, commercial towers here. So the yield on this type of class of property is quite high. It's a very high yield, but associated with that is a very high risk. Often at this level, your tenant is would be a small business, and as we know, small business is very much buffeted by economic conditions. So if you lose a tenant, it might be 12 months before you find another one. And in that period, you'd be responsible for all the outgoings. So I'd say that whilst you get high yields on commercial property, there's a high risk attached to it. The entry cost is quite high or medium. The banks won't lend you a lot of money to purchase commercial property. You might get 60%, and also you're up for stamp duty. Now REITs, or listed property trusts, are the next class we'll talk about. I'm told they're doing quite well at the moment, so I've got them as a medium to high yield. The risk is medium. Really, for those that are listed, you're subject to the ups and downs of the stock market, And if it's unlisted, really you're subject to the whims of the individual manager. So you don't actually have title, and the entry costs are low to medium. Residential property, which is what we're talking about today, the yields are low. Like John, what would you get in Geelong now? Is a net yield on residential?
Net yield 3%.
Around about 3%. It's very much the same in Melbourne now. Risk is medium, and the entry cost is medium. You can often get good gearing through the banks, but you're up for stamp duty, so it's a quite expensive entry cost. So another accepted rule of thumb is that really you can get high yields, but it's often at the cost of capital growth, and often and the alternatives being that a low yield gives you a higher potential capital growth. There are times when you can get a high yield and a high capital growth, but they're fraught with dangers. We'll talk about those a little bit later. So here's a couple of pictures I took of some properties in regional Victoria. The cost base, the asset is low, so you can often get a high yield, but poor growth prospects. The alternative, we've got some terrace houses here in Carlton, quite a high cost base, so you expect a very low yield, but you've got good prospects for strong capital growth. And our third example here, this is a picture of Port Hedland for those who have been there. It's a port for all our iron ore exports from the Pilbara. There was a stage where you could get high yield and strong growth, but really, I've got here, it's an investment lunacy. If you look at the graph, you can see that everything was going swimmingly up to the GFC, where you had high rents and high capital growth. But now, post-GFC, when our iron ore prices collapsed, you're really in that Bermuda Triangle of falling capital values and falling rents. So high yield plus strong capital growth, you've got to really be in the sweet spot. It's very hard to find. So what we're going to be talking about today is what I call residential commercial property. So with the right design, location, structure, it's got the potential to really offer you the low risk attributes of residential property, which we've talked about, and also the high yields of commercial property. And it still give you prospects for capital growth. So it's giving us the best of the both worlds from residential and commercial property. So what is residential commercial property? It's residential property that's been designed to earn income from both the leisure and the commercial short-term accommodation market. So I'm not talking about an apartment in Noosa, which is really just aiming at the leisure market. You really need to find a property that captures both the leisure market on the weekends and holiday breaks, but also the commercial markets midweeks. So I've listed a few things here, which I think are really the key attributes of residential commercial property. Is that really the property must be located and designed to really fill an underexploited niche in the short-term accommodation market, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Like any other residential property, it's got to have street side appeal. Getting the design of the complex right is critical, so it could be easily managed by an on-site manager. So you can't apply this concept to any old block of apartments. Critically, you must have the correct planning approval, so it allows for both residential and short-term accommodation. And last but not least is that each apartment must be individual strata title with a commercially driven management agreement in place. So here, there's no pooling of income. You get the return based on who stays in your apartments. And critically of all, you must have the right to be able to terminate the management agreement and revert back to a residential apartment if you want. So these are the key items, the boxes you tick to have a successful residential commercial property investment. John and I are down here in Geelong at the moment. Beautiful day, but for those of you who don't know Geelong or for interstate, it's just a great place. We had Macro Plan Australia, their economists. We engaged Macro Plan to look at the long-term prospects of Geelong and Geelong's short-term accommodation market. And sitting around the table, one of the guys said something that really resonated with me. Was that, they said it's not hard to see Geelong becoming Melbourne's Parramatta. There's a Western growth corridor down here, and really Geelong will expand based on Melbourne's expansion. So It's interesting when you talk to people who don't know Geelong, you know, the perception is that Geelong's a rust bucket, industries are shutting down, there's doom and gloom, there's no future. But the reality is that, you know, we're shifting from manufacturing to a service-based sector. Geelong's got good, steady population growth. On the accommodation side, there's actually a decline in short-term accommodation stock. And, you know, what accommodation stock there is in Geelong is in need of refurbishment. I saw one of our competitors the other day. I took a customer through, I won't mention their name, but I took one look at the couch and there's no way I'd sit on it, John. You wouldn't know what you'd catch. So I won't mention the name of the property. But really, Melbourne is bursting at the seams, and by virtue of that, Geelong benefits. So here is some statistics that Macro Plan supplied us with. This is the number of rooms for accommodation in Geelong. This can be motel rooms, hotel rooms, service departments. So you see in 2008, Geelong had 937 rooms. You pan down there to 213, it's only got 970. So really the market in Geelong for short-term accommodation stock has stagnated. So there really is there's no new supply coming on board to match the growing demand of this city. View Apartments, this is a project we finished off back in Christmas 2012. Again, you know, we find there's strong demand plus stagnant supply equals high yield. So the View consists of 48 strata title residential apartments. So these are residential apartments, individually sold. So each apartment has an individual management agreement in place. There's an on-site manager, and critically, you have the right to terminate whenever you want. Our first year of trade in 2013, we had a 70% occupancy rate. So this is the number of nights you have of the total nights available when there's someone staying in your property. And in the second year of our trading, View achieved a total overall 84% occupancy rate, which is excellent. It's voted #1 accommodation in Geelong by Trivago, which is a booking platform. It's got 4-star rating, and with View, we looked to differentiate the product. It's got a real arts focus. You'll see on that picture there. We ran an art competition, and on the corner of the building, it's a view of Eastern Beach looking over Corio Bay. So I want to give you just an example of what sort of yield we'd expect to achieve in a well-maintained trading residential commercial property. So this is my 1-bedroom apartment that I retained in the View development. It's 52 square metres. It's got a bedroom, nice bathroom, nice high ceilings, well furnished. And here are the actual results of that 1-bedroom apartment. So this is up to the 12 months ending 31 January 2015, which is basically the second year of trade. So my gross rent received was 48,147, and my average daily rental, this is how much I got when I leased my apartment out for the night. I got 161 on average. Now that can fluctuate. On weekends I might have achieved 200, maybe 220 on a busy night. And during midweek, it might be leased out to someone who stays for 3 or 4 nights. They might be paying 140 a night. So that's an average. There was occupancy rate for my 1-bedroom apartment was 82%. So it means I had someone staying in it 4 out of 5 nights, and it was available for occupancy 365 days of the year. So if you look down there, just do your maths. It's $161 a night times 365 calendar days times 82% equals my gross rent. So looking forward to what the bottom line is on that apartment, there's my gross rent at the top, 48,147. I take off my variable costs, which is the commissions I pay to the on-site manager. And these are all contained in the individual marketing agreement I have with the manager. I pay him the commissions, we pay a marketing fee, which everyone pays, and there's a clean. So the cleaning costs, I think, at View are about $70 a night. So basically, if someone stays for 3 nights, I'll make more money than if they stay for 1 night because there's only 1 clean. So basically, my variable costs are $16,815. So I'm making a gross profit of $31,332. But then I need to take off all my fixed costs. So we've got rates and taxes, $4,000. Now, the City of Geelong rates View as a commercial property, even though it's classed as residential because it's being used for commercial purposes. So the rates there are quite expensive. We've got our owners' corporation and sinking funds and a commonly owned hot water system. some repairs and small items. You know, someone might just mark the wall, just needs a quick touch up, some paint, electricity, landlord insurance, and PABX contributions. So basically, my net profit on banking at the end of 31 January 2015 for the year, I made 22,576, and as a net yield on the cost of the apartment is 5.5%. Now, I'd expect that to go to probably 6.5, maybe 7 in the third year of operation, because this is a business that started from nothing, so it's maturing. So the rule of thumb is that you really short-term accommodation matures in the third year. Looking at the tax position, again, this is looking backwards, 31 January 2015. My taxable income, which I have to declare as assessable income, was 22,576. Less my deductions, I've geared up this property at 80%. I'm paying 4.95% interest, probably lower now actually. We had a deduction for depreciation of 10,919. So deduct that off our taxable income, and I'm generating a tax loss of 3,787. The marginal tax rate is 37 cents a dollar. I'm actually getting a tax refund at the end of the year of 1,401. So bringing this all together into a simple cash flow, I've got my cash in as my net income, 22,576. Get my tax refund, 1,401. Paying my interest, 15,444. Leaves me with cash in the bank at the end of the year of 8,533. And there's a simple return on my 20% equity in the property. It gives you an after-tax return of 8.7%, which is fantastic. So John and I we're sitting in the marketing suite of the Devil at the moment. So you may have heard some demolition works going in the background. So I apologise for that. But this is our current development. This is a heritage building in the Georgian Revival style. And we're developing 28 apartments here. But before we get into the actual property, I just want to go back to our checklist of what makes a successful residential commercial property. So our first check is really, we want to find a location where there's a mismatch between supply and demand. Identify that underexploited niche of the market. Well, we look at that, we can say, well, we looked at the trading history of the View apartments around the corner, and we can see that getting the sort of occupancy rates we're achieving there. We know that there's still demand for short-term accommodation in Geelong that hasn't been satisfied. Geelong's a city of 230,000 people. It's bigger than Hobart and Darwin. It doesn't have any accredited 4.5-star accommodation, and this is what we're looking to achieve. So it's make it quite unique. And really, with the exception of you, the competition in Geelong is tired and old, and we can't see any new supply coming on board. So that's our first checklist. Secondly, we want to differentiate the product to suit demand. Now, this building we're sitting in now, it's a heritage building, Georgian Revival style of architecture. Really, it's boutique. You can't replicate it. The walls are probably a good 18 inches thick, brickwork, and these beautiful Georgian style windows. It can't be replicated. It's rich in history. There's a whole story I could tell you about this building. I'm happy to tell you down the track if you'd like. But again, we've actually got a unique product offering. We've actually designed 4 types of accommodation styles. But New York Loft, which is where this place we're sitting in now, 3.7 metre ceilings. Industrial Chic, that's we've got 3 semi-basement apartments, which are great. And then the Contemporary, which are modern. We're doing a modern extension on the building, and they're modern apartments with balconies and some spa suites. So great architecture, and also this is very much a green building. The accreditation we've got from our design architect is fantastic. In Victoria, you need a minimum of 6 stars. Some of our apartments are rating at 8.5, so that's a fantastic outcome. Third item, structured for capital growth. Our management agreements all have termination rights, so whenever you want, you can give notice and leave and do whatever you want with the apartment. The planning approval allows for both residential and short-term accommodation, and it's actually designed to provide for the efficient running of the business. So we have linen stores throughout. It's just everything is made to make it easy for both the on-site manager and guests. So want to know more. There's a lot we could talk about this, but we really need to make more time. Really, we think the View apartments, sorry, the Devlin apartments, beg your pardon, well, once they've established themselves in the marketplace and passed the startup phase, so typically about year 3, they'll be earning a net 7 to 9%, and that's net. So the third year, you'd probably make a net 3. Second year, as you've seen, the View apartment, 5, 5.5, and then you really, by the third year, you're well and truly in the marketplace, and that's where you're looking for these sorts of net 7s up to net 9s. We can also show you how the Devlin apartments has the potential to produce a positive cash flow from day one. And also we've done some IRR models, internal rate of return models, to demonstrate how just that consistent enduring annual yield will always beat the needed gearing capital gain model, where you're putting your hand in your pocket every month to fund a loss. On a risk and return basis, it beats it every time. Also, we've done a lot of due diligence on this project. Ernst & Young has had a look at our projections, and also Macro Plan Australia. So we'd like to talk to you about what they think about Devlin's earning capacity and the future prospects for Geelong. So I'm going to pass it over to you now, John, see if we've got any questions.
Absolutely. Look, I'd just like to point out before we go to the questions that there are 27 apartments available for purchase, and there are in fact only 5 left. So the community down here has fully been in support. They love the idea. The location is wonderful. Proximity to the major hospitals and commercial areas, and not that far from the beach. But it's not a holiday place. It's a working, living business. I'd like to point that out. Now, we've got a question here. It's coming from Les. He says, can we live in the apartment at some other time in the future?
Yeah, every purchaser will sign an individual management agreement with the on-site manager, and that gives you a key clause, and that is the right to terminate that agreement. So you can terminate with 3 months' notice. There's own residential, so if you wanted to, you could live in it yourself, or you might have a child who's going to Deakin University. If you're living out regional Victoria, they can stay here for a year. Then when that's finished, you put it back with the manager. So you do have that flexibility. So you're really in control of your asset. That's the beauty about it.
Okay, thank you. And a question, I think it's from Colin. What is your feeling about Geelong? What are the future prospects?
Well, look, I live in Melbourne. I've done 2 projects in Geelong. It's a great place. It's John and I were just having a chat about it over lunch before. Like, no one thought Northcote would be an attractive place to invest 30 years ago. So really, my gut feel is that really Geelong's got all the attributes for long-term capital growth. As I said earlier, Macro Plan Australia, we commissioned them with a report on prospects for Geelong, and that's available for anyone who's interested to have a look at. And what's going on with this Western Growth Corridor? Geelong will do very well by virtue of Melbourne's bursting at the seams, and things like, we're 50 yards away from the St John of God Hospital. That's been open for 12 months, private hospital, employed 1,000 white-collar workers, and no one hears about it. Geelong's been moving from manufacturing to a service-based economy for the last 20 years, so I think it's got great prospects. Yes,
can't forget the teaching hospital and construction of several things that have been enormously beneficial. The new Epworth that's going out at Warren Ponds, and the ring road that means that people can get from place to place. You can get to Melbourne in an hour. It's quite something. There's a couple of other complicated questions. One from Eileen that's, I think, too complicated about foreign investment. We shouldn't address that. I can deal with that directly, or I can pass that on to you. I'd like to suggest that over the next couple of days, I'll get back to each of the people that have logged in today and talk to you about the project. The apartments are, the 5 remaining, from $395,000 each, plus furnishings, and they're a great deal and a beautiful piece of work, worth coming in and having a look at. If you're dead keen and want to speak to me before I get to you, you've got my number, give me a call, and put your hand up and say you want to grab one of the 5 remaining. So really, look, that's all from me for now. And Phil, thanks for your time.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in. Have a nice weekend.